All right, what is up, everybody? Welcome into another edition of Swarm Talk, the Georgia Tech podcast here on the Crowded Booth. My name is Bryce Koon, your host as always. And tonight's show, as always, too, is presented by Section 103, the best Georgia Tech gear out there on the market. A great place that we want you to make sure that, first off, you mention the Crowded Booth. You can use the code Crowded Booth. Very simple, 15% off your first order. And I'm telling you, folks, I say this all the time. It is the best gear there on the market if you're a Georgia Tech fan. Better than the bookstore, better than what they got. They've got some stuff in different official stores there as well as the College Football Hall of Fame. So shout out our friends over there and the presenting sponsor of all of our Georgia Tech shows. Well, tonight's topic, kind of fresh off the heels of last week's conversation where we kind of delved into, I guess the best way to put it is, and let me change the over here. That probably sounds a lot better. Welcome in. Last week we kind of delved into, what would make this team hit their ceiling, and I took you through essentially my big three keys, like my big three factors about what this team needed and what this team would have to do to be able to hit those three things. We talked about, development of the roster. We talked about the development of the coaching staff. I felt like the depth was better. And so tonight kind of kicks off this next iteration of, going and diving into the nitty gritty, the positions, the groups, and is it a strength, the questions there. And I think we're starting off with a group that's probably the potentially the strongest group and unit on paper. I'm excited about this group. A lot of people are, and I think it's a lot of fun. So we're kicking it off with a little bit of the quarterback play. I want to start here with this, and this won't be a full hour show tonight. We'll, probably go 30 minutes or so. And if you got any questions, you can throw them in there. As Anthony says, let's go. Matt says, Bruce, let's go. Goldfield says, go Jackets. If we didn't have King, I'd feel comfortable with Philo as the starter. So here we go with this. I want to talk about each of the guys in this room. And, some rumblings out of spring practice. Obviously, you probably read some reports out of spring practice as well. What stands out about some of these teams? What's kind of one of the key things to look at when you talk about, hey, this program does this very well. They're developing this group very well. And I think that when you look at it as a whole, what is Georgia Tech doing right now? Well, they're recruiting well at the quarterback position. They're developing well at the quarterback position. That's knocks out, I would probably say 80% of the concern, in my opinion, It knocks out about 80% of the concern that you have about a quarterback room heading into a 2025 season, not just for Georgia Tech, but just in general. Like if you recruit well and develop well, there's two big check boxes. So let's start with a guy who's going to be your QB1, your de facto starter, and it's Haynes King. A lot of top 10 quarterback lists have come out, and a lot of top 15, top 20, top 100 players list have come out. And, Haynes King's name has been thrown in and around those conversations, I would say, for the past, 6 months, ever since the season ended, I should say. So 4 or 5 months. It's been one of those things where he's definitely in the running, right? Like he's definitely a guy that you say, okay, you can make the case for a top 10. And look, these lists are, it's preseason fodder. It's great stuff to talk about. But at the end of the day, it's a situation to where projectability has a lot to do with it. Recruiting rankings have a lot to do with it. The upside that you believe, the toolsiness, is that a word? The toolsiness of what you have has a lot to do with it. And just being real, at this juncture, there are quarterbacks who have better natural talent. There are quarterbacks that have better measurables than Haynes King. But I think the one thing in the pushback that I've seen from a lot of Georgia Tech fans, kind of, I guess the pushback against some of this has really been the take that you have a quarterback in Haynes King that is probably, I can't think of another player. Haynes King is probably the most important quarterback for his team in the country. You saw last year, look, I mean, Zach Pyron entered, there was struggles there. Aaron Philo entered, and you had just natural growing pains. And obviously you have, a guy that you feel like you have a lot of promise with in Aaron Philo. But you kind of saw, like, when you take the quarterback away from a team like Georgia Tech, who, look, they're not going to have, top 3 talent in the country in the ACC. They're not going to have top 4 talent, maybe even top 5, depending on what you're looking at. But a guy like Haynes King elevates you something that's just beyond the piece of paper. And so when you talk about should he be a top 10 quarterback, you've seen a lot of Georgia Tech fans kind of get pressed a little bit about this and say, you know what? It's one of those things where he means so much to Georgia Tech's success. That's why he's so valuable. It's like that conversation, the Heisman, who's the most valuable to their team's success, who's the most integral to the team's success. And, there might not be a quarterback heading into 2025 that is so integral to their success than Haynes King to Georgia Tech. If he's not there, now look, we'll get into the talent that I think they have, but you have to be real about yourself. It's just not him. And that's what he has meant to this program. He's revitalized his career. He's, there's honestly, I think, a lot of pieces to this puzzle. And let me hit this real quick. There's a lot of pieces to the puzzle of trying to figure out who Georgia Tech is. And I think one of the big things is, you have a guy that means more than just the stat sheet. And we talked a little bit about this last week. If you have number 10 under center starting for you, then anything can happen. And we had some comments on the show last Thursday, I guess it was, and there's this running misinformed, ill-advised take that we don't care for Georgia Tech in this sense. I'm not the kind of person that's going to say something that I don't believe. I 110% believe that if number 10 is under center for you at Georgia Tech, anything can happen and you can win any ball game. Like, let me make that clear. I don't care who you're facing. I don't care who you're playing. If Haynes King is under center, Georgia Tech has a chance to not just be. Let me say this again. If Haynes King is under center for you and he's healthy, Georgia Tech not only has a chance to be in every game, they've got a chance to win every single game they play. It's the intangibles. It's the mindset. It's the selflessness. And it's a guy who just loves football. And it's what Brent Key wanted when he got the job. And it has been a match made in heaven. So in terms of what he brings, look, you look at all these lists and a lot of people talk about, well, how does it rank? And look, I mean, Arch Manning hasn't played a game yet. And people have him sitting in the top 10. And I mean, in terms of a game, like, not as like the real starter. Yes, he's had some spot starts and stuff like that when Quinn Ewers was hurt. but you can't really quantify everything that Haynes King brings to the table. And that's probably why that he's not, a top 10 quarterback for some people and not a top 15 quarterback. But in terms of importance of wherever this team goes, he's going to be there. So that's the first topic I want to get out of the way of this conversation, because I do think that he brings an intangible piece to this team that could take it further than the talent level alone can. And you have to have pieces like that. It's not a knock against it. It's just, just being real. Hey, there are limitations to his game. He can exceed those because of the kind of person and player he is off the field. So that's the off the field thing. The mentality, the leadership factor that you just can't just buzz past, no pun intended, when you talk about Georgia Tech's chances in 2025, when you talk about this room. Now, in terms of on the field, look, I went back and forth with a lot of diehard fans about this. The whole stat 2 years ago where Haynes King was apparently this quarterback that him and Jane Daniels only had these certain amount of numbers. A lot of I cover LSU full time. I got the chance to watch Jane Daniels. It's not a knock against Haynes King. That's not him. These stats, it is a cherry pick stat to make someone look good. That's okay. That's the business we're in. That's the point of marketing and media and SID, to promote players. I'm not knocking that. What I'm pushing back against is the notion that they had similar seasons. Not in the least, bit. Now, King did turn the ball over less in 2024, which is one of the things we talked about coming in the season. He had to do that. One thing about Haynes King that I think we could see in 2025 is an increased downfield presence. And it's not a knock. Look, everyone knows the injury, right? Like, everyone knows the shoulder wasn't 100%. He was a guy that could, he was a playmaker. He could extend the play. He was a point guard, getting it to his receivers and his wideouts and his running backs and all of these type of guys. Like, he was just there. Any way possible to win the game, it is what it is. And Matt brings up too, he also played less games as well. So I think when you talk about what you want to see out of him in 2025, and I think Goldfellow said it here earlier, we haven't been considering, he says, that King could be even better this year. We've kind of assumed this year would just be a healthy version of 2024. That's true. A healthy version of 2024 could just be a really solid college football player, which is, I think, probably what you're going to get. I don't know, how much you necessarily will improve upon, a guy like this, but who knows? Like, what more does he have in his bag of tricks to be able to do? Well, we really haven't seen, I guess, the last piece of the puzzle is a fully healthy season where he is kept the ball out of harm's way. That would be, I guess, the only thing where you're like, okay, if he checks that box, then he's really developed from what he was at A&M. It's become full circle. And I mean, not full circle, he's gone back to it, but it's like the development cycle is complete. So with Haynes King, it's the downfield passing game. A lot of that is going to be on Buster Faulkner in this offense. We'll talk about wide receivers when we get here. You have lost a legitimate down the field threat in Eric Singleton Jr. You got to find that, obviously, over, the chemistry-wise fall camp, and as you install, who is that guy going to be, in terms of that not just you want him to be that, but that actually provides that. You have to have that. That's going to help things for Haynes King. Having, some where I think could be a pretty sneaky tight end room, having that can definitely help and be a weapon for him as well. So in general, with what Haynes King brings to the table, I've said this multiple times, I think he's a really good college quarterback. And we'll see what 2025 has to offer. If it's a full season of 2024, then you have to feel good about your chances. Like, and I mean, fully healthy. Like, that's him. Then, man, you've got a top 12 quarterback in the country. And when you have that, anything can happen. And, I go back to the conversation. If you haven't checked it out already, go back and look at our conversation with Will Reed, transfer offensive lineman from Princeton. He said he had the chance to meet Haynes King. And we talked a little bit off camera about it. It was one of those scenarios to where with a guy like King, you just know that it's like, let's go play some football. And, for a lot of guys and for this team, it just fits so well with the mindset they want. And so it couldn't have been a better marriage, getting him out of the portal, developing some things, letting him heal up. And now you enter 2025 with some really high expectations. And for a good reason, you feel like King has everything you want. He's got the mentality. He has the intangibles. He's got the base level talent to be the best quarterback in the ACC if things pan out. Like, hear me when I say that. If things pan out, like, I love Cade Klubnik. I think that Cade Klubnik had a very kind of quiet, really good season last year when you go back and look at it. There's a legitimate argument to be had that Haynes King could be better, could be the number one quarterback in the conference by the end of the year. We've got to see. I guess the only thing we wonder is when you play that full slate and you don't have the injuries, and how aggressive do you get? Does the aggressive nature that you saw a little bit more of in 2023, is that the cost benefit that, hey, we got to temper things down a little bit because we want to be more efficient. A lot of people would rather be more efficient than more explosive, and so we'll see kind of how that works out. I think that's probably the only question I have about him. If you air the ball out more, does that you go trend back into the interception issue, or is it more of just, hey, he's fixed everything and you're good to go? Bottom line, I think this is a top 12 quarterback in the country. Haynes King is the de facto face of this program, de facto leader, and Georgia Tech is one of probably 7 to 8 programs that probably feels great about their quarterback situation. Not just good, great about their starting quarterback situation. So let's talk a little bit here. As that's Haynes King. What's behind him in that sense? What is there kind of for the taking of what you have kind of going on? Because I think this is where there's maybe some differing there's maybe some differing opinions on this. Look, I want to say this. I think that Aaron Philo can be a very, very, very good quarterback. Before we get to this, I do want to get rambling. Zach, we appreciate your donation, $20 donation there, or $19.99. I guess it makes it sound better. I think the downfield passing will be there in 2025. We did it the first 4 games, and then it stopped. Lines up with when he got injured. Let's see a mix of 2023 and 2024, the confidence of 23 and the maturity and IQ of 2024. Zach, I think you hit the nail right on the head. With that combination, you're talking about the best quarterback in the ACC. You're talking about a top 7 quarterback in the country, depending on what numbers look like there. So appreciate you, Zach, for that as well and getting that in there. We appreciate the support of the show, too, there as well. So behind Haynes King, look, I love Aaron Philo. I think Aaron Philo is a guy that you are going to hand the reins over to after this season. If he develops and does his job, just look, what it's like to hand a guy the keys and without any type of pushback and what that can mean. But if you hand the keys to Aaron Philo next year, all the tools, fans love him. He led the come from behind win against North Carolina State last year. I'll just say this. I think there's going to be some packages for him this year. I think that they're going to allow him to play. Obviously kind of interesting, with the situation. I think a lot of people maybe just kind of forget of, there was a reality last year where you had a situation where he could have played in that Georgia game, would have burned the redshirt year, elected not to. A lot of people weren't too happy about that, but it, just bottom line kind of went with you to where he's got another year and he's going to be a part of the plans this year. They get him to come back. This is a guy that was sought after in the transfer portal. It's a guy who can maybe start elsewhere immediately. So a massive win for Brent Key to get out ahead of this, that entire recruiting staff, the NIL, the personnel people to say, hey, no, we want to keep you, develop you for the future because we think we can hand the keys to you. Obviously, he's got to do the work that he needs to do to get there, but that's a massive, massive get in bringing him back. So from a tool standpoint, Philo has everything you want. Like, he's got the big arm. He's mobile to the sense of where he can make some plays. He's not a statue back there by any means. Probably not the pure runner that Haynes King is at this juncture, but he is athletic. He can do a lot of things for you, make the off-platform throw. Just needs more seasoning. And I think in terms of the backup, now, look, I have heard every single wild thing imaginable about Aaron Philo. I've heard that Aaron Philo has the best arm in the country. I've heard these outrageous type of things that I'm not saying they can't be true. There's just literally no way to prove it. Like, I think the excitement level for Philo's fine because there is a lot of excitement, but some of the conjectures from fans and some of the projections of fans that it's just this foregone conclusion, well, that's getting ahead of yourself because, look, we've been excited about team, quarterbacks before. We've been excited about certain players before.
another year of development, and then obviously, stepping into year 3 for him at Georgia Tech is what redshirt sophomore season in 2026, battling a couple of the guys for the starting position. That's when you kind of get to see that come to fruition. You can say that in one vein, while also meaning that you really, really like the kid. And I like what Aaron Filo's mentality is. I think it's very comparable. I'm excited to kind of see what this year looks like for him. How much do they play him in terms of having things for him? Because I'll say this, and I think Goldfellow said this earlier. He's probably ready to play. Like, if you had to throw him out there, that's the difference with this group now. I think you've gotten to a point, and I'll get to the other two guys here in a second, but you've gotten to a point where you could probably play Aaron Filo, and the drop off it'd be there just because you have a kid who's played 4 games compared to a guy who's played 4 or 5 years in college. Like, that's just, it's not a knock. It's just the facts of the situation. So I think for that, it is, it's something for me. It's like, hey, there's a lot of excitement. Let him develop. He doesn't have to play, which is a massive, massive, positive that you can allow him. And he's also willing to sit, learn, and develop to where you get 2026, 2 years in the system. Now he's ready to assume the role. It's a very rare thing to have in college football. So the upside is there with him, the mentality. You like all the tools there as well. Zach there says as well, if King is healthy, we don't need him. I'd much rather keep King in and keep the offense rolling. Filo isn't big like Pirates, and no reason to bring him in on goal line. Yeah, that was more of I agree with you. I think that was more of that. Mark says, I remember everyone was on the Pyron train after his freshman season. Then everyone turned on him after Virginia Tech, so I'm taking a wait-and-see approach. Look, it's just, that's the emotional roller coaster being a fan. I'm not trying to tell you how to fan. I'm just saying I'm giving you the 30,000-foot view approach there. Like, let's just, let's just kind of take a step back. There's a lot to like. Crowning him as this or that this early is the same thing that a lot of fans, Georgia Tech fans or people in general, make fun of other people for doing. So, it's really good. There's a lot of upside there. They got a really good quarterback, a really good young man in Aaron Filo. I mean, I encourage you, 2.5 years ago now, you can go check out that interview that we had with him on the night that he committed to Georgia Tech. Love the kid. I think he's got a lot of upside. Interested to see kind of what they do in terms of how do they utilize him here in 2025. So I like Aaron Filo. And I want to get to this too, because Goldenfield asked questions, how do the other two quarterbacks, not King and Filo, look? This might, I don't know if this is a shock for people, but I think this is where I would crown them. And obviously the title of this show, does Georgia Tech have the best quarterback room in the ACC? This is where I think they win this. Like, this is where I think you can say, yeah, they got the best quarterback room in the ACC. Now, look, this is not my opinion. This is boots on the ground, intel type of stuff that we're talking about here in terms of where we're getting this information. One, let's talk about Graham Knowles. In the spring, they talked about has made massive strides, started one season in Texas in high school football, made the jump. Obviously, the measurables are there of a guy that, you just love to see, right? Like, it's just one of those things where, like, you look at him, you're like, holy cow, this kid could be an animal. He had to learn not just football, but he had to learn how to be a quarterback last year. And so it's not a knock against him. I think he has every tool in the chest to be a really good ACC quarterback. The development factor from what you're hearing inside that building and talking with people is that, hey, he's made some strides. He looks more comfortable, looks more like a college quarterback. That to me is exciting. And that to me is what could push you over the top as the top quarterback room in the conference. So Graham Knowles' development piece, not a guy that really saw time last year, doesn't need to see time. I think in terms of the team side of things, does he personally need to see time? That's a conversation for him in his camp. But keeping Knowles and Filo allows you to have a true quarterback competition in 2026. So the development piece of Knowles, and I wanted to go back and read here exactly what Chris Winkie said. He goes, and the one guy that has made some huge improvements, this was in the spring, was a kid. Is Graham Knowles, a kid that you look at a year ago who was only a 1-year starter in high school, and what he's done this spring compared to last is just night and day. So out of him too, he's very fortunate to be in that room. We got the right guys excited about the future. Then Brent Key obviously talked about him a little bit later on in the spring. He goes, Graham's got as much upside as anybody, so we've really got a good room there. Fully expect those guys to compete every single day from now into the season. having a guy like Graham Knowles under Haynes King, having Philo under Haynes King, and then we'll get to Grady Adamson here in a second. Having those players is like under a quarterback that bucks the trend of quarterbacks in terms of his mentality, wanting to help out the school, institute, and everything. That is like a massive teaching development piece that's not happening everywhere else. And so it's a kudos to Chris Winkie, kudos to Brent Key, kudos to their support staff for keeping all that intact. Because you have a succession plan, or you I guess you nothing's ever guaranteed or given in college football, but after this year, you have two guys that are like, okay, you've been here for 2 years, let's battle it out. May the best man win. And man, that's awesome. Like that is really, really awesome to see. The last piece to this puzzle, Grady Adamson. I was talking to someone on the phone last week about this, and I said, what are the thoughts on Grady? We had him on the show last summer when he committed, and as a guy that, Chris Winkie's really, I would say, picky about his quarterbacks, as are a lot of people, right? Like when you recruit a quarterback, you're very finicky about who you want, what your style is. I'll tell you one thing, folks. He has been maybe more of a surprise from talking with some people than maybe they thought. You bring in a kid like that, and I wanted to get some of and I mean, when I say like that, like you just bring in a young guy that is, I don't want to say that he is necessarily green in the sense, but you just bring in a kid that, knows that he's not going to start this year, knows that he's not going to, he's got two guys in front of him that are obviously, I guess you have to see like he's not really gonna play. Like, I mean, understands the situation he's walking into. Just from the conversations he's having with people, from the reps that he's taking, like, and just the continued evaluation of him, man, there's a lot of people excited about him. So it creates a scenario to where we talk about this a lot. Like, I think I probably if you listen to any of our shows, Georgia Tech show or college football show in general, and I encourage you to make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel over on YouTube. If you watch our shows for any period of time, one of the things I talk about is playable depth. And the luxury, and I'll take it a step further, the luxury of having playable depth, but not having to utilize it is the sweet spot. And so I just talked about Grady Adamson. I just talked about, Aaron Philo and obviously, Graham Knowles. When you have that stable of guys in the quarterback room, the young talent, the eagerness to learn, and a good understanding of where they sit in the pecking order, but also willing to compete, it's just rare. And I think that's why you should allow yourself to get excited, not just about 2026 in the quarterback or 2025 in the quarterback room, but for 26 and 27. Now, look, anything can happen. Like we said, nothing is given in this sport. Nothing is necessarily guaranteed because of a star rating or I mean, Tech fans should know this more than anybody. The running back room has been a revolving door of like 3 high 4 stars, mid to high 4 stars that just haven't panned out over the last 3 years. Antonio Martin, Evan Dickens, and Anthony Carey. Like, that's the last 3 guys that you've heard about from spring practice reports, and everyone's gotten giddy about it, and it hasn't panned out. So nothing's guaranteed. It's not guaranteed that one of these guys doesn't leave if he doesn't win the job. All I'm telling you is you're rolling into a situation to where you have playable depth, but you're not forced to put somebody in a situation that you don't have to, that's not ready for it. And I think that is such a luxury that this team has, to where you really can't say that about more than probably 7 or 8, guys. Like, or I should say 7 or 8 other teams. Like, that's where they are. They really love their quarterback room. And man, they have done a really good job of evaluating that, really going into depth of like, what differentiates this, fringe 3-4 star from this other guy. Like, that's very hard. It's easy to hit on, and you have to develop them. It's easy to hit on the 4 or 5 star, high 4 stars, the 5 stars. But where you make your money, if you're a coordinator or if you're an evaluator of any kind, is where you can evaluate the difference between those mid to high 3 stars and the mid to low 4 stars. And that's kind of where they've sat, right? Like, they've had, fringe 3-4 stars in terms of guys that, maybe on the teetering line of where they're going to go. And man, they've evaluated, and right now they feel really, really, really good about it. So I like where this quarterback room is. To answer, obviously, the question of the show, and I got a comment about it in the Discord. Make sure you join that below to talk some college football with us. I got that from somebody said, Bryce, you pose all of these like you could just say yes and end the show. Well, yeah, but we're talking about it there too. I think this coming into the season, I don't know much about Clemson behind Cade Cloud. I know they got some talent there, but man, from a depth perspective, when you put the gold glasses on, you really start to get excited about it. There's a reason that it's not just media conversation about why they have the best quarterback room. Like, they really think that they do, because I think they know they're two guys deep of could play right now. And I don't think they'd be absolutely scared to death to play a third guy. And I'm telling you, based off of primary sources, not secondary. Remember those assignments in high school? Primary sources. They did not feel comfortable doing that 2-3 years ago. So that's something that was, that's been a growth perspective since Chris Winke's gotten in there and elevated that room. So look, I think Georgia Tech has a really good room. I think there's a lot of excitement level to really look at it, and you're going to have some, growth opportunities for everybody. I mean, like we mentioned, Haynes King could continue to get better. Aaron Philo has another year to grow. Graham Knowles can kind of, improve his craft. And then obviously, Grady Adamson, a guy that is going to get to campus, and I think just the way that he's a gamer. Like, you just got a bunch of gamers in this room. That's what they're going to go for. So it's really exciting to see. But hey, we appreciate everyone tuning in tonight. We'll obviously be live tomorrow night. Now, look, I want to say this. If you're not a regular viewer, if all you do is hop on the channel, watch Georgia Tech shows, we appreciate you. Like, that is awesome. But we talk college football all the time too, in general. And we try to tailor it, obviously, a lot of SEC, ACC overlap content. So last night we talked live about SEC coaches under pressure, ACC coaches under pressure tomorrow, and Brent Key is one of them. We've got him under some pressure this year. We're going to explain more of that in the show tomorrow night, 7:30 Central, 8:30 Eastern. Make sure you tune in. Like this video. It helps us in the algorithm. Subscribe to the channel as well, and set up that notification bell down there below so you know when we go live. But 7:30 Central, 8:30 Eastern tomorrow night. My name is Bryce Koon. We appreciate you tuning in. Shout out to our presenting sponsor, Section 103. They do a great job supporting us. We support them. It's a great partnership, and they're going to be doing it all throughout 2025 and hopefully into the future. We'll catch you next time here on this edition of Swarm Talk on the Crowded Booth.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The Crowded Booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce Koon.